So today I have a really exciting interview. We're going to be talking with William Dietz, author of Spill the Tea, Unveiling the Mysteries of Blended and Flavored and Herbal Teas. Thanks so much for being here.
I'm very excited, Nicole, and thank you so much for endorsing the book. I could think of no better person to endorse than you. You've been a part of the tea community for a very long time. We're both fellow bloggers and definitely have, I think, supported each other's work through this. And so I was very happy to have you as a partner in this.
Yeah, thank you. I really loved the book. I really feel like there wasn't anything quite like that out there in the tea world. I have shelves of books, tea books behind me, but nothing really focusing on flavored teas. So I think you really found like a missing piece of the market there.
Well, that's great that you bring that up because my goal in writing this book actually was to fill that void. When I first got into the career of blended and flavored teas, I was asking my at the time mentor, say, what resources are available, what things are out there, what publications can I go to learn this information, and he really couldn't point me anywhere. And I felt that there was such a gap in the market because it is such an important piece of the tea drinking journey, whether or not you stay in flavored tea or not. And that's something we get into in the book, but it tends to be a gateway for many people into this exciting world of tea. And the fact that there was nothing tangible that I could go to and start to learn about the back end and about this industry from an insider's perspective, I felt was such a loss. And so I went out to try and write the book that I would have really wanted to read.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for a lot of people, flavored teas really are the gateway into tea. I know from my days working at Tivana, your days at working at David's Tea, very similar. You know that those are really people's entry into tea, or even like a classic like Earl Grey. You know, not everybody starts with like a premium High Mountain Oolong. There are people that do now, which I'm like super jealous of that they didn't go through all that tuition tea like we did years ago. But it definitely, I think, there's some kind of bias sometimes with people where they kind of tend to see once they move on from that stage of their journey, they kind of look down on flavored teas after that, which, I'm not necessarily a fan of, that, tea is tea and, every different type of tea has a purpose, even if it's not for you it plays a role for somebody else. So I definitely appreciate your shining a light on flavor teas that way.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I held that attitude as a tea blogger. I mean, you can go back and if you look in some of the archives of what I was writing at the time, it was I had a quick transition from drinking some flavored teas and then immediately really got into single origin in a big way. What you would consider a bit more premium, although I hate using that word, but I think in context it makes sense. And I really didn't pay attention to too much that was happening in flavored tea. On the contrary, what's happening in the food and beverage space in general and innovation in flavor, that's something I always kept up with. That's something that excited me. But then being able to marry the tea part of that in with this really fun flavor exploration, I think was really what created the spark and understanding of the magic that really happens with flavored tea and what you can do, because you're not just taking, and this is one of the big misconceptions, right? You're not just taking like a low grade black tea or a low grade green tea and throwing some flavoring on it to cover up. The ingredients composed end up making something greater than the sum of its parts, which I think is really cool. And there's a lot of thought that goes into it. The back end of the industry and of ideation of these products is intense. It involves botanicals, it involves flavorings, it involves multiple different industries, even so much as food scientists. If you look at some blends, they contain things like citric acid and different kinds of confections, and so it bridges so many different worlds that I find, how can you not find some kind of joy in it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a bit of being a mad scientist, kind of putting all those different things together. I really just have so much respect for people that have that ability. It's definitely, not a skill I've picked up in my tea journey. So I just have so much respect for the people that actually are able to take these seemingly unrelated things and put them together to make something, really unique tasting.
Yeah, a lot of people asking me about that too. I think it's maybe one of the top questions that I get, and I do touch on a little bit in the book is, well, can I blend a tea at home? The short answer is yes. The long answer is it's very complicated. The way that I always try and uh, recommend people get into blending on their own is start by buying an already or pre-flavored base. So let's say if you go to one of your favorite tea purveyors and they have a very simple, black tea flavored with, I don't know, mango flavoring or something, and there's not really a whole lot in there. On the side, then you can go and buy different herbs and different fruits and different ingredients that you can then layer. Because the most complicated piece of this and the most convoluted piece of this is the flavoring component. There are places that report to sell, flavoring online. However, most of this or a lot of this you can't really trust as food grade, and so that's why it seems that this daunting task of blending is so difficult. Well, it's because primarily you don't really have access to the raw components. And so one of the fun, I think, ways to first get into it is to experiment with what we call layering, right? So you take, like I said, that base blend, and then you put a mishmash of things on top of that and see how it tastes. So it's a mango blend. Okay, let's put a bit of, I don't know, candied mango and dried ancho chili, both things you can find, and make a mango chili black tea, right? Something like that. And you don't have to mess with the liquid flavoring component. The scales that you need to be able to blend small batches are typically really expensive because you need to usually 2 decimal places. So yeah, it's not the easiest thing to get into as a consumer, I'll say, but there are definitely ways that you can experiment and have fun with blending at home. I touch on it a little bit in the book, but mostly the goal of the book was to give people an understanding of what goes on behind the scenes with these larger companies that tend to actually supply the majority of the flavored tea from most companies around the world. Primarily, that's centered in Europe and North America. These big companies that have been doing this since like the 1700s. These are established legacy companies that have been working in the tea trade for literally hundreds of years. It's incredible. So their aptitude for it is unparalleled.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one thing I was really kind of surprised when I first started getting involved in tea. It makes sense, but I didn't really think that there were these suppliers that were pretty much, making the tea that most stores were selling. It wasn't until I was like reviewing teas and I started noticing I got the same tea from multiple companies.
Oh yes.
Definitely.
So you can start to see those fingerprints. We always kind of have this word for it when we're tasting through different suppliers. Oh yeah, I can definitely, tell, oh, that's the mango flavoring from this supplier, or oh yeah, no, that definitely has the signature of this company on it. And it's wild because so many of these companies are not consumer facing, right? There's so many different brands and so many different companies selling tea, which is all incredible. And not to say that there's not variety, right? Because companies can go, they can have custom blends done. So it's not all like everyone is working off of the same exact blends, but you do start to see some similarities across blended and flavored tea. I think if I can give a little shout out, I think that was one of the really nice things about working at a company like David's Tea and having that background. There was a lot of development done. At any given month, we were working on between 100 and 150 different profiles every single month across our various supplier base, and so pretty much everything was custom. Included, having suppliers buy different ingredients, having different flavorings that were created specifically for a particular blend. It was when you got into that level that you really got to see some of that innovation and work with it. And that's something that really drove me because then you could see what kind of new consumers you could capture. I think in this journey of trying to elevate tea consumption specifically within North America, which is always, the hill that I'm going to die on, right? I'm very, very pro, let's get more people drinking tea in whatever format in North America possible.
Absolutely.
Uh, People crave variety. People crave experiences. And yes, experiences come in many different forms. It just so happens that flavored tea is such a nice gateway because it's something that's typically very relatable.
Yeah.
And that I think I was really passionate about because standing behind the counter and serving a customer a tea that tastes like, I don't know, s'mores, and to see the eyes light up and say, this is tea? This can be tea? Are you kidding? And there's this immediate switch of, okay, I just truly didn't think this was possible. And that's something that always really brought a lot of joy.
Yeah, absolutely. When I worked at Tivana, that was one of my favorite things because people would, it was always like the husband that got dragged in by their wife. And he's like, I don't like tea. And then inevitably he'd be bored and sip a sample and he would be like, wait, this is tea? And it's really cool seeing that light bulb moment for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I'm curious, Nicole, what kind of questions do you want to dive into? Like, let's get into some nitty gritty. I'm really excited to debunk some myths or spew some
Yeah,
facts that are maybe a bit more under the radar, or who knows
absolutely.
what.
Yeah. One of my favorite ones that you addressed in the book that I was like, immediately went like, yes, as soon as I saw the page about it, was natural flavor versus artificial flavor, which
Yes,
can definitely be a
yes.
controversial topic. Yeah.
A very controversial topic, and one that I feel very comfortable speaking about. So in the book, each chapter of the book engages a subject matter expert on that particular topic. So everything from supply chain to certifications like organic and fair trade and all these things. So I engage different subject matter experts. And for the flavoring component, I actually was able to discuss flavoring and get some insight from a company called McCormick Fona. They're a flavor house based out of Geneva, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. And their whole thing is education, and so I really respect them as a company and try to engage with them as much as possible. And one of the first things that was discussed was the difference between natural and artificial flavoring. Spoiler alert, there's not much difference between natural and artificial flavoring. So just at the core, because I'm not going to touch on the health component. I don't think I don't even touch on that in the book. It's really driven by the facts, right? But pick up a bag of just about, or a package of just about any food you buy on the store shelf, you're probably going to see either natural or artificial flavoring as a component of those ingredient lists. Now, at its core, flavoring is, what's the best way to put this? At its core, flavoring is taking the most recognizable different chemical compounds, whether they be terpenes or esters or things that just give foods their aroma, either extracting those or synthesizing them and putting them in a food safe solvent, whether solid or liquid. So flavoring can come in two different forms, either solid or flavor, or a solid or liquid. But the base chemicals, say a great example, and this is the one that I have in the book, is benzaldehyde. So benzaldehyde is a chemical component most closely associated with almonds and cherries. This flavor can either be synthesized, so you can use other components to create the exact same chemical component called benzaldehyde, or you can take this from almonds or other various sources. If the benzaldehyde is extracted from the natural sources, let's say from either almonds or cherries or a combination of different foods, that's labeled as a natural flavor. If it's synthesized, it's labeled as an artificial flavor by FDA rules and regulations. But the chemical compound itself is identical. So the difference is only the source material. That's it.
Yeah. It's definitely, I've had so many people ask me about that, there's so much misinformation out there on the internet, vilifying artificial flavors. And I think it's like almost like we need a better word than artificial because it doesn't
I agree.
quite explain, what it actually is.
I agree. It's as an aside, in Europe, I think there's a different category called nature identical, which I find a
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
really nice category of flavor. So you can either have artificial, nature identical, or natural. And nature identical just means that whatever the chemical components of, let's say if it's a lemon, so you have citral is a big component in different lemon, right? But if that matches basically close enough with what the natural profile of a lemon flavor would be, then you're able to call that nature identical, which I think is very appropriate. But yes, the FDA has and Health Canada, they've not made that distinction.
Definitely. Yeah. I think that would be good if we had that way.
Yeah, maybe someday. Who knows? We'll see.
Definitely. I know one thing you also kind of covered was inclusions, where a lot of times when you're making a flavored tea, you're not just adding flavors, you're also adding visual things. I definitely found, when I was selling tea, people want to see if it's a banana tea, they want to see bananas in the tea.
Oh yes, that's just human psychology. It's amazing what a visual can do to elicit different emotions and different responses. So yeah, making sure that your strawberry flavored tea contains some level of actual strawberry pieces, even though they wouldn't necessarily steep out as being strawberry flavored in the cup, it does it does work to elicit some sort of authenticity in the mind of the consumer. And that's and I think that's necessary. It's providing a link and providing something familiar, right? Because again, the flavoring is very esoteric to people. A staff member at David's Tea described it really well. They said, think of it like perfume. You can smell it, it's present, but you can't see it. That's what flavoring is. So being able to rely on some of these other beautiful ingredients that we have and different inclusions, whether those inclusions be for purely for visual or for aromatic complexity or for mouthfeel or some of these other things that I touch on in the book, having access to that toolkit just makes a more complete and more complex experience overall when drinking blended and flavored tea. And it's engaging all of your senses. You have your sight, you have your touch if you're feeling the raw components, you have your taste, your smell. Even some would argue you have hearing if you're hearing the kettle boil, things like that. Like, so it's a very multisensorial experience, and those inclusions go a long way in adding just extra layers to that.
Absolutely. I know also I really, really loved that you kind of addressed the supply chain of tea. That's something I really don't see covered in most books. Even books that are written by tea companies, they don't talk about how the tea gets from, they go into some of the processing of the tea, but how does it get from, the farm that made it to, the consumer at home? I really was glad to see that you included that.
Short answer, a lot of hands.
Yeah,
There's
yeah.
a lot of hands that touch the tea and ingredients before they hit the consumer. And this is for better or worse, right? I'm not in defense or in support of the current state of the tea supply chain. At this point, it is what it is, right? And so more, I just wanted to demystify and unveil the back end and the inner workings of that supply chain. Um, and I think that's really important for people to see. It's an extra layer of transparency that I think eventually will go a long way in trying to have the industry correct itself, because there are things that are not, that could be better, could be more efficient, could be better for the people, the planet, and everything in between. But to see it and lay it out as it is, I think is very important, because it gives people a baseline understanding. And then from there, you can kind of backtrack and have those conversations. And that's definitely something I've been trying to do very actively on LinkedIn is actually the primary platform I'm doing, just because I am working for myself. This is the career, so trying to use that information to help engage these different conversations with people has been really eye opening and insightful. Because there are things that are being remedied. I think that it's probably due time.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, your LinkedIn posts have been really like insightful, and just the comment section alone is like really interesting to see people's responses to things. I saw you had shared that I think similar to me and you, that we kind of primarily drink higher end unflavored tea, but you were talking about how that actually makes you more objective when it comes to flavored tea, because it's not necessarily like what you're drinking, on your own.
It's amazing having biases, because everyone has biases, even me, right? Going into any kind of conversation, going into any professional engagement, I have some level of bias. Uh, but in particularly when it comes to flavored and blended tea, I tend not to have as much bias because it's not something I'm personally attached to, which sounds very funny. All of my content, or 90% of my content, is focused on blended and flavored tea because I do think it's very important. I just so happen to not be that consumer. But I think what that allows is a disconnect, and it becomes something that's not personal. And I think that has really been an aid to what I can deliver for different companies and different clients, because I'll never have to taste through the lens of, well, will I drink this or not? That's never the question. The question is always, is the customer going to drink it? Is the consumer going to drink? Is your consumer going to drink this? Those are the questions that I want to make sure that I have, more or less the answers to for different clients. Because who cares what I want to drink? That's my prerogative.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most small batch kind of tea blenders, tea people that are making flavored teas, they're really blending to their own palate. Ultimately, that they're like, what do they think tastes good?
Yeah.
Not necessarily objectively saying like, is this what my customers want? Is this something that tastes the same to somebody else? Because taste is incredibly subjective. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I touch on that a little bit too. Subjective, not only with each person, but also regions, right? That's something we get into in the book as well, right? The different taste profiles. If you've ever gone to Europe and, I don't know, you pick up an orange juice, lo and behold, it tastes maybe a little bit different than what you're used to. There's a reason for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I had a really early like lesson in my tea journey about that I was writing for Tea Views way back when. If
Oh yes.
you've been in tea a long time, if you know what I'm talking about. And they had sent me this like chili pepper tea, and I'm incredibly sensitive to spices. Like cinnamon is about as hot as I get on a regular basis. And I was like, this is not it for me. But somebody else got sent the same tea, and they were from Southern California, and they grew up eating spicy food all the time. That they were like, it's nostalgia. It tastes like home. Like the total opposite of my reaction. That it really just kind of, set that in my mind of like, okay, yeah, just because I don't like it doesn't mean somebody else isn't going to like it.
Yeah, and I think that also goes to show why there's so much variety. If you go on a lot of these companies that sell flavored tea, like on their stores or in store, the variety is seemingly unending. But there is a reason for that, and the reason is to cater to all of these different palates and all these different preferences. And so, yeah, building assortments of flavored teas can be a really daunting and very challenging task, because you have to take into account all of these various experiences and preferences that people have. I mean, unless you're really focusing on something very niche, very tight, maybe that'll work. But if you're going for a bit of a broader consumer base, a bit more mass market, well, then, yeah, your assortment's got to be pretty darn big. I know a lot of people that love passion fruit, and I know a lot of people that hate passion fruit.
Yeah.
Um, And so, that blend is not really going to be for everybody. I wouldn't say that there's a daily driver kind of blended tea that appeals to everyone. As many people would like to think, oh, Earl Grey might be that example. I don't know about you, but I know some staunch haters of Earl Grey.
What's funny? I don't like it in tea, but I love Earl Grey flavored things. So, like, give
That
me
is
an Earl Grey
ironic.
cookie any day, but I don't want to drink it.
A lot of people, I think, associate it too much with perfume. It's not
Yeah.
citrus in the way we know citrus. It's so the top note and brightness of citrus that I think airs a bit on perfumey that turns people off. It almost, I think, tastes cosmetic to some people, which again I find so interesting. Yet it still remains one of the top sellers. I have a sneaking suspicion that it remains one of the top sellers, because the industry keeps putting it out as one of the top flavors. That's my
Yeah.
that's my unpopular opinion.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case because that's like just the default. If you're going to make a flavored tea, it was probably, other than like jasmine scenting, it was probably among the first flavored teas. That I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
Absolutely. I find that so funny though.
Definitely. So how did you come into tea? I know, we initially met, I probably through Twitter or Tea Chat or one of those sites back in the
Yeah.
day. But yeah, I'd love to have you share kind of some of your journey.
Yeah, of course. I'll try and keep it a bit tight. I got into tea very early on. I started drinking tea at the age of 15, and actually started my blog very shortly after I got into tea. Initially, my motivation for starting to drink tea was health based. Actually, I wanted to quit drinking sodas or other different sugary beverages, just because I saw the impact that those were having on my body. And so tea became a seemingly good thing to gravitate towards. I knew that it helped me in times where I was sick or had a sore throat or whatever it was. I felt that it really gave me that sense of comfort. And so initially it was all health. That very quickly became the last reason that I stayed with drinking tea. And I really became enthralled by the stories, by the craftsmanship, by the way that you could experience different tastes and travel through a single leaf. I think a lot of people have that same feeling when they first start getting into wine. I didn't drink alcohol at the time. I was in the U.S., definitely not legal, and so tea was my gateway for that. It was my gateway to exploration. I'd always been a traveler, and so I think it just fit a lot of different. It fit a lot of different interests in my life, and I was able to take that and really expand on that. I started going through the Specialty Tea Institute classes when that was still available through the Tea Association of the US. And I got through the series of courses by age 17. Took a few other professional courses, both in coffee and in flavoring and a few other things, as my university years progressed. I operated a tea business in university that quickly became adjacent to a small micro roaster. So I got into the coffee business as well, and graduated with a degree in marketing and entrepreneurship. But I always knew that tea was going to be my career somehow, some way. And I spent a pretty hard, I think it was 6 or 8 months post graduation, wondering what the heck I was going to do. I sent a bunch of applications everywhere, every tea company I could think of, even some people that I'm friends with to this day. And ended up, my longtime mentor reached out to me kind of on a whim. I was going through a interview process with Keurig Green Mountain. And in the middle of the interview process, I got a Facebook message from my mentor. He said, "Hey, I don't know what you're doing these days, but I think you'd be really good for this role, but you'd have to move to Canada. What do you think?" I said, "Yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it." Lo and behold, turned out to be David's Tea. And I was there for just shy of a decade.
Very cool. That's such a journey. And I think really you were all of those tea bloggers always considered you as like the one who made it because you actually found a job in the industry.
By pure networking. Truly, that was really what it came down to. I don't know if I was more apt or more qualified. I don't actually think that was the case. But networking goes a long way, and
Yeah,
that I think is what ended up, I think, really driving my path forward, and I'm very grateful for that. And in that vein, one thing and a key part of my book was I really wanted to give that knowledge back. There's no sense of gatekeeping in what I want to do in tea because I understand the power of knowledge dissemination. And the more that people can have this at their fingertips, the better it's going to be for everyone involved. And so that's kind of I guess my little spiel is, I never want to hide information. I never want to go behind the curtain again, right? I always want to make sure it's very upfront because ultimately we're all going to be better for that knowledge.
absolutely. I think that's really my philosophy when it comes to tea as well. It's so important to just really share knowledge. There's so much to tea that I don't think there's anything that anyone can keep to themselves and say like this is mine because I guarantee you somebody else has done it before.
Absolutely. Tea is too intertwined in history and innovation and business and colonization and commerce and health and everything in between that, yeah, your facet, it's been exposed somewhere along the line, almost guaranteed.
Absolutely. So what has the response to the book been so far? I know it came out like a little while ago, but I'd love
Yeah,
to know kind of what people have said. I know it's scary to write a book. I know.
yeah. It was a bit daunting of a task. I was lucky enough to be able to work and contract with a ghostwriter. So
Yes,
not saying they wrote everything, right? It was very because it was so knowledge based. It was a process that I was very active in. But ultimately, I'm not really a writer. Sure, I blogged a bit and I've done a few, marketing things and here and there, but I'm not inherently a writer. But I know enough about my field to be a bit dangerous and at least how to boil it down into a way that is accessible. And so that was really the point of me working with a ghostwriter. The book is self-published, so I didn't go through any kind of publishing house, and the reception honestly has been I think really good. I've gotten comments from people in and out of the industry with feedback, both critical and not. I love critiques. I truly do. I think it's the only way to improve is to hear the feedback raw in whatever form that may be, because eventually down the line it's going to make what I'm putting out better and more relevant and useful. But there have been some definitely some good supporters of my work. I was very fortunate at the World Tea Expo this year to do a tandem talk with McCormick Fona actually on flavoring, and we
that's
used
awesome.
we used that platform or as a way to market the book. They were very generous, and were able to use that as a tool also for their own marketing within the expo at their booth. But yeah, it's been pretty humbling. Um, but also I've learned a lot, and I think being able to connect with a lot of people, whether or not they drink flavored tea or not, I think everyone has walked away and learned something new, which is all I can really ask.
Absolutely. I definitely highly recommend it. Where can people find the book?
The book is available in so many different places. The outlets, actually, there are some outlets that I don't even know about that are selling the book. But one of the first places you can look, of course, is Amazon. So you can get a printed book from Amazon. One thing I will say about Amazon, because I know some people are touchy on Amazon. However, I will say for a self-published author, Amazon does give some of the best returns and royalty rates of many of the companies out there. So I can say I've been very fortunate to be able to work with Amazon. But you can also buy the book in various formats. So there's paperback, there is a PDF copy, even downloadable. There's ebook, and there is audiobook from various outlets. Actually, the best place to go and seek for outlets to purchase the book is www.sirwilliamoftheleaf.com. It has all the information there, even a bit of inside scoops. You can see some videos, video interviews that were part of actually writing the book. There is the initial questionnaire back in 2020 that I set out to gather and see what kind of questions, the top questions that people had about flavored and blended tea. So there's a lot of good behind the scenes stuff on that website as well, not just the links to purchase the book. But yeah, I'm very happy to share. And also, Nicole, I'm very happy to help celebrate your blogiversary. You're fabulous to work with, and couldn't recommend your content enough. I try and push it whenever possible when people are looking for a good unbiased source. So obviously, Tea for Me Please is one of the first places I'll go looking for information.
Thank you so much. So the blog turns 16 on October 6th. So I'm going to be announcing a series of giveaways on Instagram. And William's been kind enough to donate several copies of the books. So we're going to have those available for you to enter to win. I'm going to put a link down below for William's website as well as for the review that I wrote of the book. But thank you so much for chatting with me. I hope that everyone found it really useful. I know I definitely did. But I'm sure I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate it.
No problem.